Hi everyone, I'm here with another book. This time it's Horrid Henry Tricks the Tooth Fairy. I'm reading only one chapter, that is Horrid Henry's New Teacher. It's really funny. Oh, and I almost forgot, we have 3 friends who are here to listen our story. Tails, Army Bear, our new one, and Daddy Elmer. Okay, so let's get on with this book. And actually the chapter that we're reading. Let's find the chapter. Here's the chapter I'm going to read. Horrid Henry's New Teacher. Now, Henry, said Dad, today's the first day of school. A chance for a fresh start with a new teacher. Yeah, whatevs, scowled Horrid Henry. He hated the first day of term. Another year, another new teacher to show who was boss. His first teacher, Miss Marvel from the Avengers, I've known that, had run screaming from the classroom after 2 weeks. This is so hilarious. His next teacher, Mrs. Zip, had run screaming from the classroom after 1 day. Bringing in new teachers wasn't easy, thought Horrid Henry, but someone had to do it. Dad got out a piece of paper and waved it. Henry, I don't want to read another school report like this again, he said. Why can't your school reports be like Peter's? Henry started whistling. Pay attention, Henry, shouted Dad. This is important. Just look at this horrible report. Henry's school report. It has been horrible teaching Henry this year. He is extremely rude, lazy and disruptive. The worst student I have ever taught in my life. Behaviour, horrid. English, horrid. Maths, horrid. Science, horrid. PE, horrid. What about my report? Said Perfect Peter. Dad beamed. Your report was perfect, Peter, said Dad. Keep up the good work. It has been a pleasure teaching Peter this year. He is polite, hard-working and cooperative. The best student I have ever taught in my whole life. Behaviours, perfect. English, perfect. Maths, perfect. Science, perfect. PE, perfect. Peter smiled proudly. You just have to try harder, said Peter, smirking. Horrid Henry was a shark sinking his teeth into a drowning sailor. Ow! Shrieked Peter. Dad, Henry bit me. Don't be horrid, Henry, shouted Dad, or no TV for a week. I don't care, muttered Henry. When he became king, he'd made the law that parents will only go to school, not children. Horrid Henry pushed and shoved his way into class and grabbed the seat next to Rude Ralph. No, 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 shrieked Rude Ralph. I got a new football. Henry didn't have a football. He kicked his through to Moody Margaret's window. Who cares? Said Horrid Henry. The classroom door slammed. It was Mr. Nerdon, the toughest, meanest, nasty teacher in the school. Silence! He said, glaring at them with his bulging eyes. I don't want to hear a sound. I don't even want to hear anyone breathe. The class held its breath. Good, he growled. I am Mr. Nerdon. Henry snorted. What a stupid name. Nerd, he whispered to Ralph. Rude Ralph giggled. Nerdy nerd, whispered Horrid Henry, snickering. Mr. Nerdon walked up to Henry and jabbed his finger in his face. Quiet, you horrid boy, said Mr. Nerdon. I've got my eye on you. Oh, yes. I've heard all about your other teachers. Bah. I made the stronger stuff. There will be no nonsense in the class. We will see about that, thought Henry. Our first sums for the year are on the board. Now get to work! ordered Mr. Nerdon. He had an idea. Quickly, he scribbled a note to Ralph. Ralph, I bet you know that you can make Mr. Nerdon run screaming out of the class at the end of lunchtime. No way, Henry. If I do, will you give me your football? Okay, but if you don't, you have to give me your £1 coin. Okay. Horrid Henry took a deep breath and went to work. He rolled up some paper, stuffed it in his mouth and spat it out. The spitball whizzed through the air and pinged Mr. Nerdon on the back of his neck. Mr. Nerdon wheeled round. You! Snapped Mr. Nerdon. Don't you mess with me! It wasn't me, said Henry. It was Ralph. Liar! Said Mr. Nerdon. Sit at the back of the class! Horrid Henry moved his seat next to Clever Claire. Move over, Henry, hissed Claire. You're on my side of the desk. Henry shoved her. Move over yourself, he hissed back. Then Horrid Henry reached over and broke Clever Claire's pencil. Henry broke my pencil, shrieked Claire. Mr. Nerdon moved Henry next to William. Henry pinched him. Mr. Nerdon moved Henry next to Tough Toby. Henry jiggled his desk. Mr. Nerdon moved Henry next to Lazy Linda. He scribbled all over her paper. Mr. Nerdon moved Henry next to Moody Margaret. Moody Margaret drew a line down in the middle of the desk. Cross that line, Henry, and you're dead, said Margaret under her breath. Henry looked up. Mr. Nerdon was writing spelling words on the board. Henry stared to rub out Margaret's line. Oh dear, Margaret won't be so happy with him now. Stop it, Henry, said Mr. Nerdon. Without turning round, Henry stopped. Mr. Nerdon continued writing. Henry pulled Margaret's hair. Mr. Nerdon moved Henry next to Beefy Bert, the biggest boy in his class. Beefy Bert was chewing his pencil and trying to add 2 plus 2 without making much luck. I don't know why is he behaving like Jeffy. And seriously, 2 plus 2 is basically 4. Horrid Henry inched his chair onto Beefy Bert's side of the desk. Bert ignored him. Henry poked him. Bert ignored him. Henry hit him. Pow! The next thing Henry knew, he was lying on the floor, looking up at the ceiling. Beefy Bert continued chewing his pencil. What happened, Bert? Said Mr. Nerdon. Dunno, said Beefy Bert. Get up off the floor, Henry, said Mr. Nerdon. A faint smile appeared on the teacher's smiley lips. But he pushed me, sir, said Henry. He never feels such a punch in his life. It was an accident, said Mr. Nerdon. He smirked. You will sit next to Bert from now on. That's it, thought Henry. Now it's war. How absurd to be a nerdy bird, said Horrid Henry behind Mr. Nerdon's back. Slowly, Mr. Nerdon turned and walked towards him. His hand was clenched into a fist. Since you're so good at rhyming, said Mr. Nerdon, everyone write a poem, now! Henry slumped in his seat and groaned. A poem? Bleach! Yuck! He hated poems. Even the word poem made him want to throw up. Horrid Henry caught Ralph's eye. Ralph was grinning as mouthing. A pound at him. Time was running out. Despite Henry's best efforts, Mr. Nerdon still hadn't run screaming from the class. He would have to act fast to get that football. What horrible poem he could write? Horrid Henry smiled. Quickly, he picked up a pencil and went to work. Now, who is my first victim? Said Mr. Nerdon. He looked round the room. Susan, read your poem. Susan stood up and read. Bow wow, woof, woof, woof. I'm a dog, not a cat, so scat. Too much repetition. said Mr. Nerdon. Next! He looked round the room. Graham! Greedy Graham stood up and read. Chocolates, cookies, sweets and cakes, donuts, ice cream is my favourite treat with lots of pies to eat. Too many rhymes, said Mr. Nerdon. Next! He scowled at the class. Henry tried to look as if he didn't want the teacher calling him Henry, snapped Mr. Nerdon. Read your poem! Horrid Henry stood up and read. Pirates puke on stormy seas, giant spoon on top of trees. Blech! Henry peeked at Mr. Nerdon. He looked pale. Henry continued to read. Kings are sick in golden toilets. Those drug up on Daddy's shoes. Blech! Henry picked again at Mr. Nerdon. He looked green. Any minute now, though, thought Henry, and he'll be out of here screaming. He read on. Babies love to make a mess down in front of Mum's best dress. And what car ride would be complete without the stink of last night's treat? That's enough, joked Mr. Nerdon. But I haven't got to the good bit yet, said Horrid Henry. I said that's enough, gasped Mr. Nerdon. You failure! He made a big black mark in his book. I threw up on the boat, said Greedy Graham. I threw up on the plane, shouted South Susan. I threw up in the car, shouted Dizzy Dave. I said that's enough, ordered Mr. Nerdon. He glared at Horrid Henry. You'll all stay in for detention after school is finished. Get out, all of you brats! It's time for lunch. Rats, thought Henry. Mr. Nerdon was a tough teacher. Rude Ralph grabbed him. Ha ha, Henry, said Ralph. You lose. Give me the £1. No, said Henry. I've got until the end of lunch. You can do anything to him between now and then, said Ralph. Oh, yeah, said Henry. Just wash me. Then he had a wonderful, spectacular idea. This was it. The best plan he'd ever had in his life. Someday someone would stick in a plaque on the school wall celebrating Henry's genius. There would be songs written about him. He'd probably even get a medal. But first things first, in order for his plan to work to perfection, he needed Peter. Perfect Peter was playing hopscotch and squash with his friends Spotless Sam and Tidy Ted. Hey Peter, how would you like to be a real member of the Purple Hand Gang? The Purple Hand Gang was Horrid Henry's secret club. AKA, seriously, that's his fourth club. Peter had wanted to join for ages, but naturally, he would never let him. Peter's jaws dropped open. Me? Said Peter. Yes, said Henry, if you can pass the secret club test. What's in it for? Said Perfect Peter eagerly. It's tricky, said Henry, and probably much too hard for you. Tell me, please, said Peter. All you have to do is lie down right there below that window and stay absolutely still. You shouldn't move until I tell you to. Why? Said Peter. Because that's a test, said Henry. He did talk for a moment. Are you going to drop something on me? No, said Henry. Okay, said Peter. He lay down obediently. All I need is your shoes, said Henry. Why? Said Peter. Henry's guard. Do you want to be in the Purple Hand Gang or not? Said Henry. I do, said Peter. Then give me your shoes and I'll be quiet, said Henry. I'll be checking on you. If you see moving one little tiny bit, you can't be in my club. Peter gave Henry trainers, then lay still as a statue. Horrid Henry grabbed the shoes and then dashed up the stairs to his classroom. It was empty. Good. Horrid Henry went over to the window and opened it. Then he stood there holding one of Peter's shoes in each hand. Henry waited until he heard Mr. Nerdon's footsteps. Then he went into action. "Help!" said Horrid Henry. "Help!" Mr. Nerdon entered. He saw Henry and growled, "What are you doing here? Get out!" "Help!" shouted Henry. "I can't hold to them much longer." "He's slipping. He's fallen." Horrid Henry held up the empty shoes. "He's gone," whispered Henry. He peeked out the window. "Oh, I can't look." Mr. Nerdon went pale. He ran to see the window and saw Perfect Peter lying still and shoeless on the ground below. "Oh no!" gasped Mr. Nerdon. "Right, I'm sorry," panted Henry. "I tried to hold on to him. Honest, I did." "Help!" screamed Mr. Nerdon. He ran down the stairs. "Police! Fire! Ambulance! Help!" He ran over to Peter and knelt still by his body. "Can I get up now, Henry?" said Perfect Peter. "What?" gasped Mr. Nerdon. "What did you say?" Then the terrible toss dawned. He, Ninus Nerdon, had been tricked. "You horrid boy! Headmistress's office! Now!" shrieked Mr. Nerdon. Perfect Peter jumped to his feet. "But," spluttered Perfect Peter. "Now!" screamed Mr. Nerdon. "How dare you! Go to the mistress' office." "Ah!" shrieked Peter. He slunk off to the headmistress's office, weeping. Mr. Nerdon turned to race up the stairs to grab Henry. "I will get you, Henry!" he screamed. His face went white. He looked as if he was going to faint. "Help!" squealed Mr. Nerdon. Then he fainted. Clunk, clunk, thud. When the ambulance arrived, the only person lying on the ground was Mr. Nerdon. They scooped him up onto the stretcher and took him away. The perfect end to a perfect day, thought Horrid Henry, throwing his new football in the air. Peter sent home in disgrace. Mr. Nerdon gone for good. Even the news that scary Miss Battleaxe would be teaching Henry's class didn't bother him. After all, tomorrow was another day. Did you like this story? I'm sure you did. My toy friends liked it. Bye. See you later.